Ready? Ready on that side? Good afternoon, fellow citizens. Let the record show that it is 6:01, and we'll call to order the regular August 13th, 2019 council meeting for the city of Durant. Please stand. I'm fixing to really hit somebody. Is James Dalton here? Okay. Please stand while Paul Bunce gives the invocation, and I'm going to ask Danny Sherry to lead the flag salute.
Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day and just for people that dedicate their time to the city's business. Thank you for people that come here out of interest to move our city forward. Just ask you to watch over us and be with us during this meeting and help us as we serve this city.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. I'd like, before we start, to welcome our interim city manager, Paul Bunce, and our interim assistant city manager, James Dalton, who's, I understand, out. He's at a conference in the city today. And I think I see Tim somewhere. We'd like to welcome Tim and Brandy here with us today also. So would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Morris.
Here.
Councilmember Shear.
Here.
Councilmember Tomlinson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Brittingham.
Here.
Mayor Gruby.
Here, we do have a quorum. Everyone is present. Moving to our consent items, we have quite a few of them today, and as you know, they can be approved all in one vote, or they can be pulled. Certain ones can be pulled from the consent items to be voted on separate or voted on as a whole. I have been asked to pull Q. I guess Q's the only one that I've been asked to pull from the consent item. Does anyone else have one to pull?
Item number T is in Tango.
Item N.
Madam Mayor, not to pull one, but to strike one. We need to strike V, as in Victor, from the list.
B is in boy.
Victor.
Oh,
V
I'm
is in
sorry,
Victor.
Tom, sorry. Okay, that means that we have pulled N, Q, T, and V has been stricken. Do we have a motion that we accept the consent items less those three items?
I'll make a motion to accept the consent items, less the three that were stricken or removed.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, would the clerk please record the vote?
Councilmember Morris.
Aye.
Councilmember Shear.
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham.
Aye.
Mayor Gruby.
Aye. Motion carries. Now we will go back and we will discuss the items we pulled from the consent items. The first one is item N. Consider approval of contract with GTS Technology Solutions for rugged extreme tablets and Havis mounting for new patrol cars. Miss Marie.
So, the 17 rugged tablets, and the mounting would be in the new 2019 Chevy Tahoes. But as we had a discussion, we're talking about reducing that, and I have the vendor here for any questions y'all might ask on the agreement or on the quantities. And his name is J.D. Rowell, if y'all have questions for him.
Howdy.
Good evening.
I'm J.D. Rowell.
Mr. Morrell, I just had in reading that, we had a concern that we discussed, and I discussed with Marie and you just briefly ago. The issue was that we were ordering 17 of the laptops, the hardened laptops, as well as the mounts and all accessories. We only have 10 vehicles. It's gonna be at least, roughly 6 months or so. Just didn't feel it was wise to buy all 17, have 7 sitting over here in a box until those vehicles come in. And you and I had discussed the option of maybe splitting this bid and going ahead and after talking with the interim city manager, I think that he said we could propose this, is go ahead and approve all 17 if we could pay for 10 now and then the other 10 when we receive them.
Oh, so order 10 now and then 7 later?
Yes,
That wouldn't be a problem.
that was the main question I had.
Is that the city manager's recommendation then to,
Yes, just order the 10 now that we need, is that not on? And the other 7 when they come in, that way we don't have them sitting around and warranties passing by.
makes sense?
Did they discuss that the bid was a month out of date?
Yes.
Okay,
I just have to change that real quick and send it back
Okay.
over to Marie in the morning.
okay, thank you. And
I have a question, but not necessarily for the rep here. I seem to recall voting last month that the new cars would be ready to hit the streets with our approval to purchase them, and obviously that must not have included these things, so I'm kind of wondering what's going on with that. Is Chief Hauser here by any chance? Oh, James.
Thank you.
Council Chief Hauser is away at a conference right now.
I mean, I thought when we approved the lease of the new Tahoes, they'd be ready to take an officer and hit the road running, and apparently they're not, so I'm just kind of, don't really like that.
Yeah. I don't have a good answer for you on that. That was not part of the specs that we spec these new Tahoes out at. The mounts were not, so that's going to have to be an extra cost.
I know they need them, and we need to give you guys what you need, but they're just kind of a surprise, and I'm just wanting an explanation from someone.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
I think what he, go ahead.
Well, I would say a partial clarification. It could be that they are ready with laptops that could be put in the car, or just carried in the car, and not the mounted computers.
That's correct.
So that they could be in service immediately, just not in the format that we'd like.
That's correct.
I think what Councilman Morris is referring to is when we asked the chief if these cars, when they got here, they were going to Shipman for additional whatever put in them. And we asked if that would be all that they would need, and he said everything except radar, and they would be taking that out of the existing cars. So I think Councilman Morris is just he's surprised all of a sudden we're gonna have computers now.
Understood. Understood.
Thank you for coming up here.
Are there any other questions? Do we have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the contract with GTS Technology Solutions for the rugged tablets and mounting hardware for the patrol vehicles with the stipulation of paying for 10 now and the other 7 upon receipt.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please record the vote?
Councilmember Morris,
Aye.
Councilmember Shear,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham.
Aye.
Mayor Gurke.
Aye, motion carries. Next item pulled was item Q. Consider approval of contract number 2019-46 with Mike Ward to perform the task of Lake Ranger at Lake Durant. Marty, I was gonna try to finish before you got up front, so you're fast.
Do what I gotta do. I make the opening long enough that it gives me time.
Okay.
This one is entirely on me. The contract is good, except for we found one place today we want to clarify. If you look on item 2 and I, this is an old contract that we kind of rewrote this year with Mike Ward and changed some dates and those kinds of things. The money actually stayed the same, but it says there will be no contract payment for the months of December and January. It's about the third sentence down, and that is something we need to strike. We used to at one time not be open those 2 months. Now we're open year-round. He deserves pay even in the winter. So I want to be clear that we're striking, there will be no contract payment for the months of December and January. And if it's okay with you, if we strike that, we can approve this contract as is.
Yeah, it can be approved as amended.
I will make sure and get Cindy a clean copy
Okay,
for you.
okay.
I just discovered it today, so.
Move approval of contract 2019-46 with the corrections recommended by Marty Cook and city attorney.
Do we have a second?
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Could the clerk please record the vote?
Councilmember Morris,
Aye.
Councilmember Shear,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham.
Aye.
Mayor Gurke.
Aye, motion carries. Next item removed from consent, item T. Consider accepting a donation of 3 batting cage nets, artificial turf, and 2 L screens from the Monterey.
And I'll be here for you today on that one as well. Sorry, go ahead, Jerry.
Well, I was just going to say, it's kind of customary too when we are considering accepting donations, and these are, as I looked at those pictures, are pretty neat. Going to be pretty good additions to our South Ninth ballpark. But anyway, I wanted to express some thanks on behalf of myself and others that, as we consider this. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and you're fine. Here to serve you however you want. Brandy and Tim Rundle donated these nets to us as a city to use at the parks. One of the reasons they're here tonight, we want to appreciate them. If you want to come up and.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
Mayor, council, Paul, you've had 3 days. Have you fixed these streets yet? So.
Give me a week.
I'll give you a week. You got till Friday. Before you tonight is an item to accept this. My wife and I, we purchased the Monterey is almost a year ago, Labor Day. And one of the things we had considered doing with the gym was turning it into a batting cage facility. And I found a dealer out of Minnesota. We got them brought to Oklahoma. And the very next week, we got a cash offer pretty much for the gym. So the batting cages were no longer needed. So we had considered selling them and doing something. And then we both decided we thought it'd be best if the city could utilize them for some of their parks. I talked to Marty Pope, and we're going to be installing these out at Plyler Park. There'll be 3 of them out there, and I think they'll be put to very good use by our Little League and our softball teams as well. So really excited about this.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Unless you have questions, I'm good.
I guess we should call for a motion.
Motion to accept the donation from Tim and Brandy with the 3 batting cage nets, artificial turf.
Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk record the vote?
Councilmember Morris,
Aye.
Councilmember Shear,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham,
Aye.
Mayor Groby.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you, Tim. All right, the next thing is under item 3, information items. I have been asked to discuss item B, or have whoever's supposed to discuss it. Community Development Monthly Report, July 2019, includes requested additional information regarding outdoor seating.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Council. This is kind of a follow-up from last month where I kind of told you kind of the regulations from ADA and ABLE. That was kind of could be a hindrance to having outdoor seating. This month, I went out and did some measurements of the sidewalks that you guys have asked for and looked to see kind of what they look like. And we will bring those up here that we can take a look at them. The average kind of sidewalk width that was found was kind of between 5 and 10 feet on average. There was some areas that was about 3 foot in width, so there's not a whole lot of space there to really do anything with. This area outside of Roma's here is about 7 foot, so you have about 2 foot potential for tables and things, but that's still not a whole lot of space. But then you also have to think about with the bumpers of vehicles being over the curb line, and then you also have planters and things like that, and then just the enjoyment of wanting to be outdoors too. So that's something else to consider. I do have a meeting with, I've been in touch with the Main Street merchants as well as Imagine Durant, just to kind of get their thoughts, and talking with some merchants as well. There's a meeting set up here in a few weeks to meet with them and get their thoughts and feedback as well. So just wanted to kind of briefly show you guys what was found so far, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them.
Does anyone have any questions? Thank you so much for your report. Okay. Next item, number 4, under excuse me, I missed one. Item S under information, Blue Zone projects and Clean Street ordinance. And I believe Ms. Kara Bird's going to talk to us.
Hello, Madam Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and present to you today. I also have a colleague, Ms. Lisa Curry from the TSET organization, that's going to talk to you about this initiative as well. Really quickly, I'm going to hand you guys some books and some handouts, if that's okay.
Thank you. I have the book.
I can take it.
Paul, I'll get you one at the office tomorrow. So, I am elated to stand before you today to talk to you a little bit more about Blue Zones and what that can mean for our Durant and our community. And so you guys have already received a packet. You can see the information here on the prompters, but Blue Zones will be coming to our community August 27th through 28th. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what Blue Zones are and why it's important that they're coming here. So Blue Zones was actually founded by a gentleman named Dan Buettner, who works for National Geographic. As he was traveling, he found 5 pockets where people were living longer, healthier lives. And he thought, why in the world are these people doing this? They have nothing in common as far as their geographical location. And so he started studying it, and he found that each of these people lived by what he calls the power of 9. And it's things like their environment allows them to move naturally. They eat a plant-based diet. They have a strong sense of purpose, a strong faith base. They have a strong sense of family and friends and things like that. And so one thing that really stood out to me is whenever he was traveling, he was actually in Japan, and there was a gentleman who was 105, and he got up every day and he went spearfishing. And he was like, wow, we are definitely not doing that in America. And so he came back and he ended up implementing what he calls this Power of 9, or the Blue Zones initiatives here in the States. He has worked with 49 other communities, and when they come in, they actually work with school sites, work sites, restaurants, city governments, and faith-based organizations to help make the healthy choice the easy choice. So is our environment, our built environment, allowing our community members to walk and to bike and do things like that instead of having to actively use, cars and public transportation. So they will be coming to Durant August 27th and 28th to assess our community. So they will be here. They will do a keynote speaking engagement the 27th. The 28th, they'll have focus groups, and then they'll have a Friends at 5 event. And it's really important, as you guys as council members and our city leaders, if you can attend any of those, because we want them to see how strong our city is so that they will potentially decide to come and work with us. If Blue Zones does come to our community, it can offer a ton of grants and resources here, but they first have to come and assess the community. And because we have them coming, and we have a gentleman named Dan Burden, who's their built environment expert, and he will be coming September 5th to actually assess our built environment. And one of the things that I wanted Lisa to talk to you guys about is the Complete Streets initiative that goes back to what Blue Zones is all about and how to make our community safer. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa for a second, and then we'll answer any questions you may have.
Hello, I am Lisa Curry with the TSET Healthy Living Program, and I've seen you a few times with our trails work and some other initiatives. The Crosswalk Project we worked with James Young and his crew on, so we look at built environment as well in our program. And so with looking at Complete Streets, I believe Kara had submitted the Complete Streets ordinance that was drafted by IBTS during their contracted time here. And he did send this to me, so this is editable. I mean, if it doesn't fit the city, we can always tailor this to fit the city of Durant. We had sent you some information on just, why Complete Streets policies. The decisions are there to ensure people of all ages and abilities can get around safely and easily. He made the joke about our streets. I know there's a challenge there, especially with funding, and there are some, funds out there. I know that Becca, looks for that for you as well, and our program will usually forward those when we hear about those. We work a lot with, especially on this the Rails to Trails program, we work with ODOT as well, so we receive their information when their grants are coming up. But just looking at how important it is for Complete Streets, because it does affect our health as well. And so not just in active living and transportation, but also in the health lifestyle here. So that's what Blue Zone will come in and look at as well. They'll do that assessment in September, and he'll tell what the challenges are here and, what we're facing as Oklahomans, as Durant individuals. And so a lot of times we think, well, this is a rural community. We don't do that here. Complete street policies are usually adopted in the larger cities, Oklahoma City and as such, but that's really not true.
An answer for you all as a council, since we're bringing them in as a contract. Okay, thank you all so much.
Thank you. Our next item under number 4, administration. 4A1, consider granting of waiver of bid and approval of service agreement with Texas Cemetery Restoration, LLC, for ground penetrating radar survey in the amount of $33,000. Hi,
Thank you, Mayor and
how are you?
Council. I'm good, thank you. Okay, so I guess we've been working on this a little while, and
Yeah.
I'll let Cindy kind of start from here.
Yeah, I'll start and I'm going to kind of speak to the background of this and how we got to where we are today. You're right. And then Rusty Brenner, who's with me here, will speak to how his services work, what all is involved, and so you have a better understanding of that. And it's probably not the first time that I've had this subject matter before you, but this is regarding these cemetery, do something about that, to leave this cemetery better than how I found it records-wise, any other way that I can. And there's ways trying, to complete these records. In the late 80s, the Bryan County Historical Society compiled a book that we still use today, and it's a valuable resource, and it does note all of the information off of all of the headstones in these older sections. Unfortunately, it does not address unmarked burials, so we are not able to account for every space in the cemetery. And that is my goal. So I do have a part-time assistant. She assists me 2 days a week. And I have tasked her with going out to the cemetery, starting in this section that contains plot number 1, and mapping, writing down the placement of each of these burials that have headstones. That will tell us essentially how many spaces are left open, be it because they're available for use or because it's an unmarked burial. In the first section, which as you, in the first section, which would be like a fourth of that brown area, she came up with 782 spaces that are either available or unmarked burials. There's going to be some of each. That's as far as we can go on our end. And then how do we account for the rest of it? And that's when we need the help of a company that specializes in cemetery restoration. The project, as I see it, is two-phase and it's twofold. The primary purpose is to account for each and every space in the cemetery so that we do know exactly how many people are buried there. I will never know the identity of all of them, unfortunately, but I will know how many are there and our records will be complete. This is not something we need to repeat again. It's a one-time thing for this area. And the other part is it's going to be necessary to present a detailed accounting as we go through this process, with the end goal being reverting abandoned spaces back to the city. We must first account for what spaces are unused versus what ones are used but unmarked. So once we have the results back from this service and I can get a detailed list for the city attorney, and we can present the district court judge with an exact number and location and a process for notifying the public and heirs of the owners, because they were adults in 1904, so they're no longer with us, but their heirs, then we can proceed on. This is not going to be a quick thing by any means. It's a lot of tedious work, but very necessary. But we're doing this one phase at a time. And I do believe that once we do get the abandoned lots reverted back to the city, it will allow the cemetery to reach its full usefulness. It will also delay indefinitely the need for expansion, which is a significant cost that we honestly don't need to bear right now, because we're going to end up approximating, just on this area that you see in brown, we'll probably have close to 3,000 spaces is what we're guessing. So that's significant. It will, they'll still be selling spaces there long after I'm retired. So it is, it's important. It also brings activity back to that part of the cemetery that often when people come in, they don't even look in that direction. They go towards a newer area, but there will be more attention paid by the community to that area that brings some attention back to it, other than just the caretakers, and so that to me is heartwarming. I do have the unanimous support of the Cemetery Advisory Board to move forward on this, and they give their unanimous recommendation to council to approve this. And with this being said, I'm going to introduce Rusty Brenner with the Texas Cemetery Restoration Company, and he can go into further detail about how this works and give you some slides on that. And then if you have any questions, we'll both be available. Yes.
Thank you, Cindy. I want to run through this fairly quickly. I have about 14, 15 slides. What ground penetrating radar is and what it isn't. It is not X-ray. It is not going to show you the bones and the stuff in the ground. It is electromagnetic waves that are shot into the ground from a radar and then picked back up by an antenna, and then it maps it on a computer console, giving us what's in the subsurface, so changes in the subsurface. To give you a rudimentary example, if you ever walked a creek bank and you see the different strata, clay, gravel, sand, and the stuff like that, when you dig a burial and you pile up the dirt and you place a burial in the hole and then fill it back up, you change that soil, and that soil is changed from the surrounding soil. So the dielectrics of the soil from the radar bouncing back up look different when that's recorded through the computer based on the radar that's collected. So it's really showing us differences, air pockets. If there's concrete vaults, those actually show up very well. But old caskets, things like that, metal hardware, some things like that show up. But it's not about seeing what's in the ground. It's really seeing what's going on with the soil as you go over the surface. So a few limitations of GPR. And after going to the cemetery, we have one here that we're going to have to be very careful with when we do the data collection. And poor ground conditions would be that. So things that absorb the radar would be wet clay-like soil. So on the other side of the Red River, from where I live, you guys have the red clay, which is more like where I grew up in East Texas. Where I live in Dallas, we have black clay. So the more moisture that's in the ground, the more it's going to absorb the radar, and we're not going to get the reflection back to give us the information. So we have to be careful about when we collect the individual radar grams in the cemetery. So weather, temperature, things like that are going to be a factor. Any kind of physical obstructions where you have trees and roots, those areas are going to be limited as to how well we're going to get information back from those areas. There's not a ton of trees in those sections, but that would be limiting to those areas. Composition of what's in the ground is indeterminate. You don't know unless you dig what's actually in the ground, and that's where you need an archaeologist to actually do a dig. So this is a non-invasive way of viewing what's in the ground without disturbing the soil, which is kind of the main point of not getting into the old burials. So a little bit about basically how it works. It looks like a jogging child's cart. It has a radar in the middle of it connected to a computer console. It shoots the radio waves in the ground at a 400 megahertz antenna, through the antenna at 400 megahertz. The higher the number, the shorter distance you get through things. So like looking for rebar and concrete. The lower the number, the deeper in the strata you're going to go. So we're going to get somewhere between 6 and 12 feet of penetration. We're going to focus on the surface to about 6 feet, but usually most burials are going to show up in that 3 to 4 foot range. The grid layout, we're going to use GPS and total stations as well as tape measures. So we're going to go and set up base station points in that area of the cemetery so that those are known positions. We're going to then lay out a grid over that area so that that can be re-pulled with tapes or remarked with GPS or total stations at a later date. The grid layout is going to be something like this in the area to be surveyed, and we'll probably break that up into the 4 sections divided by the road, even though it's all technically section 4.
It's on, that's section 4, yeah, but
It's
each of those
squares, yes.
squares, there's 4 sections in that round.
Right, so we'll break that up into different quadrants and lay out each grid itself individually. We want to go perpendicular to the existing graves. The cemetery is pretty well laid out. Some of the older areas you see a little bit of curvature through the rows, but it is laid out fairly well in a grid pattern. So once that grid is laid out, the GPR equipment will be pushed across the grid on a 2-foot interval. So every 2 foot down through the grid, we'll be collecting information that gives us a good total collection of the area. So if you imagine radar, it goes out in a conical shape. And so on that 2-foot increment, we're actually crossing radar so that we cover the entire path of what's on the ground. Going back to the obstacles, as we get up close to tombstones and around tombstones, concrete obstructions like curbing, things like that. You're going to get a little limitation around those types of things, and trees. But the basics is we're going to have the grid, then we're going to go back and forth across that, collecting that data. This is a real picture of us doing a project near Waco, Texas, and what the card actually looks like in the radar. It's not going to really tear anything up. It's just pushing a slide across the ground, basically. So a little example of what we actually get back, and this is a radar example. This is a radargram of one slice, so one particular path through an area, and what shows up from the radar. So it looks like a bunch of white and black squiggly lines. The surface is about yay far from the top, so that's getting through the grass and the leaves, things like that. And then you have spiked things like the black and white line there. That's probably a metal object that was at the surface or near the surface that shot the radar right back up to us because of the reflection. And then you get to the next 2 or 3 roughly, there are what's called a hyperbola, so, or an upside down U shape. And to give you a little better example of why that is, if I've got it in here. Okay, so, and I was talking about, you dig the grave pit and you pile up the dirt and you put everything back. That changes the dielectrics of the soil. So even if you pack more on top, it's going to look different in that radargram that we were viewing that looked like a bunch of black and white lines. But what shows up are those hyperbolas. Since we have a grid laid out, when we collect that information, there is a survey wheel on the machine that actually gives us the exact position we are on tracking through that grid. So when we go back to this and put it in a software, it'll show us, because we've inputted where we started and where we stopped, it'll show us exactly where it is on that grid. So then when we get the information in the final project, when we get the final report out, we can actually go out and physically mark where we're getting the best information for a possible unmarked burial. GPR is not 100%. The only way to really know is to actually do some digging, and the only way to do that safely without getting into graves is called ground truthing. Ground truthing is taking away 4 to 8 inches of the soil, and as you can see, this was a highway project where they knew of a historic cemetery near an expansion for a highway. They decided to do GPR to narrow down where they needed to look. They came back with a backhoe and then began to scrape away, and as you can see, this is the basic of what it looks like whenever a grave is placed back in. It looks different, and there's going to always be a difference in that, and that's what's showing up in the dielectrics of the GPR radar information. Is that probably gain, as she said, 3,000 burials, most as far as empty spaces, lots for sale. Conservative estimate, somewhere between 1,500 and 3,000. So if you're looking at spending money for upkeep on new areas of the cemetery expansion, this is a investment that will pay off 300 to 900 times what it actually costs to do. Anytime you look at expanding a cemetery, obviously you got to mow it, you got to put in roads, you got to do all that kind of stuff. This is just a simple way of finding what we can without actually digging up and tearing up stuff. Any questions?
I did want to add something here that, and you'll see it in his quote, but he does install the stainless steel disc at all locations of unmarked burials, up to 200 burials, and then it's $4 for each additional burial. It's worth $4 to know where a grave is. We don't want to start to dig a grave only to find someone's in it. So it's worth $4 for that. And that was one thing that the cemetery board was very specific about, was wanting the most modern technology to do this work, to avoid that. But anyway, I wanted to make you aware of that. If I see that we're going to exceed that 200 mark easily.
And it may be that stainless steel markers are not necessary for us to install. It may be that we just help supply the markers to you guys, and if the cemetery has the people on site and can utilize a tape measure, could install them themselves.
Yeah, so that could be a learning curve for me. I don't mind doing that. I'll do it. But if there's no other questions, then I think that's it for us.
Madam Mayor.
Cindy, you might address that you did look for other vendors and for a best price and
I did.
Your recommendation.
Yes, thank you. I did. This is a very unique service that is not widely available throughout the country. I did not find another company that did this type of work within a 150-mile radius. I did find companies, one in Arizona and one in Virginia. There's one out of Ohio that will send someone to Oklahoma and has to Oklahoma City and to Tulsa. My concern about using that is I will never meet these people before they come out and do the work. It's whoever they send there, and I know who I have here. I even was bold enough to ask Rusty who his competitors were here in the area, if there were any, and he said there are in Houston and Austin. When you go further out like that, I think they do factor in their lodging because they are coming in from a far distance. The price goes up for that. And like I said, there isn't another company within 150 miles that does this. The other companies I researched, they do this as kind of, it's further down the list. Their primary function is utility line location, and that's where the big money is. So it's not in cemeteries. And I think with Texas Cemetery Restoration, we have a company that's all they do. So I feel secure in seeing this as a sole source and ask for a waiver for the bidding process.
Madam Mayor and Council, if I might take just a minute. Cindy has talked to me about this project pretty extensively, and the end goal is, as Cindy stated, is to recover unused cemetery plots. Some of these may have been previously sold, but they may have been 100 years ago or 75 plus years ago, and someone purchased a entire section of 16 plots and used one or two of them, and now we've got a dozen or more plots that are being unused, and appear not to for any plans to be used. So as a way of recovering those, being able to sell those and use our existing area, I mean, this is a project that could net the city hundreds of thousands of dollars, but more importantly, use the land that we have without increasing the cemetery footprint. So it's taken a lot of hard work. Cindy's put a lot of time and effort into this. Once this is all done, what I anticipate is that we have a grid, a plot where we can show the public. We can say, hey, these are the cemetery plots that we're seeking to recover as either unused or otherwise, and have the district court approve that, subject to the right of the public to object, if they have a particular reason to. But this will give us something to hang our hat on to say we know that these particular plots have been unused for the duration of the cemetery, and so that we can recover these. But Cindy's put in a lot of work, and I think it's something that will be beneficial in several different ways for the city.
Thank you.
Cindy, as I recall, and I think probably long before any of us were, I know I didn't live here back in the early 70s, but you mentioned the record keeping, and I think part of that is due to a fire loss.
Well, I did some research on that, and Robbie Tonabee with the library actually provided me with an article from the Durant Democrat in 1978. had a picture of Aubrey Griffith on the front page of the paper, and he was talking about how the cemetery board had asked for a city employee, a department head, to take over the maintenance of the cemetery, and he had done that about a year and a half prior to that article being written. And one of the first things that he did when he took over the maintenance and care of the cemetery was to send the record books to City Hall. And when the reporter asked him why, he said, to make sure we get paid, which has always been a mystery for me, because I have these large books with no visible fire damage on them, but I've always been told they were, you know, the original books were destroyed in the fire, and but it just, some part of that didn't make sense to me, and I'll be happy to share that article with all of you, and I can email that out. So that tells me, it was an indication to me that the city did not necessarily maintain neither the cemetery nor the records previous to about 1976, which would have been, you know, over 70 years. The first 70 years that Highland was in existence. So that tells me that's why the records are not that complete. They probably felt at that time they knew who was out there, and it was smaller, and, you know, they'll always know. And I'm not sure, you know, exactly why they didn't keep very good records at all. Maybe they had other tasks that took them away from that. But once I have them over from about 1979 to 80, I don't need to have the services of a company like Texas Cemetery Restoration to do those areas of the cemetery, because those records I can move forward with. It's prior to that where all the gaps are. And these are gaps that I don't have any addresses. I need to put that out here right now. I have no addresses for any of the spaces that were sold there. I have no addresses for those owners. And many of them, I don't even have a complete name, because they went by initials at that time. And so it could be, for example, A.J. Jones. I don't know what A stands for, or J, and I don't know where he or she lived. Sometimes it's Mrs. Jones, and I don't even have that much. So that is something that Mr. Markham and I have talked about, is showing the judge that record book to show him this is exactly what we're left with. This is all we have. And apparently when they made a deed, they gave it to the person, and they didn't keep a copy of it, which if you go back far enough, that would be very difficult to do. But so I have a few from the 80s, not many copies of deeds. It wasn't more until the late 80s into the 90s that we got more extensive information. And so we're at a real deficit. But I still want to account for everyone. And that's the main purpose of this. But I think that answered the mystery of the fire. There was damage to equipment in the building, and it says that in the article. It does not mention the records. So, however, though, having said that, if you look in the front of the Historical Society book.
The brown area on the map, that's only where we're talking about now, right?
Yes, yes, because there is a phase 2 of this. That once we get this completed, there is additional area. Like as he was saying, this is about half of what we need to do. But I wanted to come to you with this. I wanted to show you the value of what we have and how this is actually working as it should. When I come back for phase 2, then you'll already be very familiar with the benefits of what we're doing. So.
Any other discussion? Are we ready for the vote?
I move that we grant the waiver of bid and approve the service agreement with Texas Cemetery Restoration LLC.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk, who's not up here, record the vote?
To see my list. Okay, wow, I always read off my list. Councilmember Morris,
Aye.
Councilmember Shear,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham,
Aye.
Mayor Groby.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you all
Thank you so
very
much, Sandy.
Thank you.
Under number item 9.
That is what I was, the budget supplement does have to come with that. And Judy, do you want to speak to that?
When you see budget adjustments on the consent order, that's because you guys have already taken action in a previous meeting. When they're bringing it and I know about it, we can bring the supplement at the time that you're approving the item. So y'all have now approved it, but under state.
Aye.
Mayor Groby.
Aye. Motion carries. Under item B, consider approval or denial of recommendation from Oklahoma Municipal Assurance Group, OMAG, to deny tort claim of Bill Coleman. Is there any discussion?
I did include the claim file as part of the attachments to this item. And I was assisted by the Water and Sewer Line Maintenance Department and the Utility Department in gathering the background information in some of the pictures that are attached with this. It is the recommendation of OMAG that the claim be denied.
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham.
Aye.
Mayor Groby.
Aye. Motion carries. Next item on our agenda, item C, consider approval of collective bargaining agreement with Fraternal Order of Police, Local 116 for fiscal year 2019 through 20, and authorize the mayor to sign agreement or take any other appropriate action. Ms. Carey.
Mr. Buckley participated in negotiations, but I can answer any questions you may have, if there are any.
Do you have a general overview of the difference between the newly approved contract and the previous one? Just
Yes, the majority of the changes made were cleanup from changes last year, just cleanup of the language of the contract. The only monetary change was they decided to add a step to their pay scale to the end of it in lieu of a 1.5%. We actually budgeted for a 1.5%, and since it only affects a handful of officers, adding the step, we can free up that money.
And as I looked at that, I think the only ones that are affected are those that are at step 13.
Correct, and there's estimate maybe 3, possibly 4.
Any other questions?
Move approval of collective bargaining agreement with the FOP Local 116 for
I
fiscal
second.
year 2019-2020.
second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please record the vote?
Councilmember Morris.
Aye.
Councilmember Shear.
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham.
Aye.
Mayor Groby.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Kara. Next item on the agenda, item number D, consider appointment of 7 members to Senior Citizen Advisory Committee.
All right, we had 7 citizens that have applied to be serving on this advisory committee. And one of the applicants, Becca Collins, actually is not a resident of Durant, so we will ask her to serve as a staff support person. And we also would recommend the other 6 applicants to be appointed, so we can go ahead and begin the work of the committee and then come back later for another person to fill it out.
Is there any discussion?
I think it's an excellent choice, and a number of the applicants that have applied are just, I'm very pleased with the caliber of those folks.
Good people on there.
Yep. I would move that we approve the appointment of 6 members. Do we need to, Paul, do we need
And Becca
to make
is-
any reference to Ms. Becca?
Well, you can include that if you want, that you be designated as a staff support person.
I move the appointment of 6 members to the Senior Citizen Advisory Committee, with the 7th member to be named later, and also to name Ms. Becca Collins as a support member to that advisory committee.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please record the vote?
Councilmember Morris,
Aye.
Councilmember Shear,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham,
Aye.
Mayor Groby.
Aye, motion carries. I don't know if any of those members are here today, but welcome if they are. Our next item on the agenda is item E, consideration to approve Wall Engineering LLC agreement for professional services C-2019-51 in the amount of $256,378 for the wastewater treatment plant belt filter press improvements, engineer services partially funded by the U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration, EDA, Public Works Grant Award Number 08-01, Administration EDA Public Works 01, 05284C-2019-22, and Choctaw Nation match contributions.
That's a mouthful.
I knew it had to be you on this one.
Always lots of numbers. Just to kind of give some background information, the city did receive $1.5 million from EDA in April, and Choctaw Nation generously contributed $700,000 towards this project with a total budget of $2.2 million. This allowed expense for engineering is included in the EDA budget, and there'll be no city match that will be required for this project. And if you do the math, I know Tom was talking to you about the amount beforehand. It is the allowed percentage that the agency allows, and it's 11.66%, which is a standard rate. Brandon is here if you had any questions with him. We did conduct a full solicitation process. We publicized in 2 papers, and we only had 1 engineer that did respond to that with his statement of qualifications, and EDA approved that with only 1 submittal, and the contract has also been approved by EDA.
Okay, anyone have any questions for Ms. Becca? Is there any discussion?
Move to approve all engineering LLC agreement C-2019-51 in the amount of $256,378.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Would the clerk please record the vote?
Councilmember Morris,
Aye.
Councilmember Shear,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham,
Aye.
Mayor Groby.
Aye, motion carries.
Okay, thank
Thank you,
you.
Becca. Item number F, consider approval of ordinance 1884, amending the City of Durant Code of Ordinances by adding a section providing for the collection of insurance proceeds, providing for a repealer, and declaring an emergency.
Madam Mayor, I can speak about this, or the chief can. This is previously, the chief previously presented this to council. This was a provision allowing for the city to bill liability insurers if there's somebody who is at fault for whatever it is, and their insurance policy may provide coverage for city emergency services. This permits the city to employ an agency to assist in the collection of those and establishes a fee.
And this is just some, I guess, some maintenance work to finish off this project here, so we can actually start collecting the money.
Okay.
Any questions? Sections 1 through 3.
If there are no questions, do we have a motion?
I make a motion, we approve ordinance 1884, amending the Durant City Ordinance, Code of Ordinances by its section, providing for the collection insurance proceeds, providing for a repealer, and declaring an emergency.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
And that'll be for sections 1 through 3.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please record the vote?
Councilmember Morris,
Aye.
Councilmember Shear,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham,
Aye.
Mayor Groby.
Aye, motion carries. Number G, Con-
You need to move section 4, the emergency.
oh, sorry. Okay, do we have a motion for section 3, 4, emergency?
I move to accept section 4 for the emergency.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please record the vote?
Councilmember Morris,
Aye.
Councilmember Shear,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham,
Aye.
Mayor Groby.
Aye, motion carries. Next item on agenda is item G, consider approval of request to increase Crawford and Associates Service Agreement C-2019-15 for amount not to exceed $52,000 for additional fiscal year 18-19 financial services and bank reconciliation.
Mayor, Councilman, this is a request to increase the amount of 52,000 because of the to provide additional service for the 18-19 financial service and reconcile our bank statement. We already have the contract with them, but just increase to the, not exceed to the 52,000.
Right, for additional services, right, for the reconciliation.
Yes, Well, we're we're short of staff, so something we did not have time to do it.
Does anyone have any questions for Angie?
Move approval to increase Crawford and Associates Service Agreement C-2019-15 not to exceed $52,000 for fiscal year 18-19.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please record the vote?
Councilmember Morris,
Aye.
Councilmember Shear,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham,
Aye.
Mayor Groby.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you, ma'am. We now enter under item 5, the public hearing section. Under A, consideration of PC 2019-11, ordinance number 1882, a rezoning request from A1 agriculture to R1 single-family residential for 1003 Rodeo Road. Is there any citizen who wishes to speak? If not, then would you wish to speak?
Sure. Just kind of briefly run through this. This is a rezoning request for an applicant that came to staff requesting to place a mobile home trailer onto a piece of property that has an existing single-family home. They were not able to do so under the current zoning, and then also they're not really going to be able to do it even with the rezoning. And it's going to be considered a spot zoning because of the area. If you go down to the zoning map, you'll see in that area there's mostly ag still, and the comp plan calls for this to be industrial since it's real near the airport. And as you know, we're still working on that, but currently the comp plan we're using calls for this to be industrial. But with this being mostly ag, it's considered a spot zoning, so it's in planning terms that's not a good thing. You don't typically want to just take one piece of property and zone it to something else without having surrounding pieces being somewhat similar to of a zoning type, if that's kind of a brief explanation of what spot zoning is. And there's the future land use map where you can see it's mostly considered for industrial at this point in time. The applicant did actually go ahead and purchase the mobile home trailer, and they're figuring out what they're going to be doing with that now. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended denial of this rezoning request, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I do not believe the applicant is here this evening. I have not seen them. So, but if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I kind of had one, and I think I read it as I reviewed. But a conditional use permit can't be considered either, can it?
Correct, it cannot because it is not specified as a restricted use within the table that we use as a zoning restriction.
Can you tell us why the zoning commission did not want it to happen?
Multiple reasons. One was the fact of it being a spot zoning. The other, the comp plan was not allowing it to be, was not calling for it to be a single family. And then there's a whole lot more work that the applicant would have to do, and that's even a maybe that they'd even be able to get that additional work done. So that just recommended for denial. They did table it for an initial meeting for staff to look at if there's other alternatives, and I was unable to find anything different that would help them.
Are there any other comments? Are there any other comments? Any other comments? We will now close the public hearing session, and we need to have the council, if they have no questions, we need a motion.
Move we follow the planning and zoning recommendation and denial of PC 2019-11, ordinance number 1882.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please record the vote?
Councilmember Morris,
Tom, is this one of those yes means no, no means yes?
It is. An aye vote is a vote to deny the application.
Aye.
Councilmember Shear,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham,
Aye.
Mayor Groby.
Aye. Motion fails.
Oh, motion
I'm
passes.
sorry, motion passes. Thank you, Tom. Our next item is number 6, citizens' comments on non-agenda items. If there are any citizens, and I did not have anybody sign up that I'm aware of to speak. I don't have any paper, so. Okay, is there any new business? If there's no new business, I'll ask for a vote or a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please record the vote?
Councilmember Morris,
Aye.
Councilmember Shear,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham,
Aye.
Mayor Groby.
Aye. We're now adjourned out of the city council, and we will now adjourn into the Durant City Utility Authority. Let the record show that it is 7:14. The glares on the clock. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Morris,
Here.
Trustee Shear,
Here.
Trustee Tomlinson,
Here.
Vice Chairman Brittingham,
Here.
Chairman Groby.
Here. We have a quorum, so we shall proceed. Our first item under consent items. Is there any discussion or any questions? If not, we will move on. Okay. Do I have a motion that we accept consent item A, which is approval of the regular minutes of the July 9th, 2019 meeting?
Make a motion to approve the consent items.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Would the clerk please record the vote?
Trustee Morris,
Aye.
Trustee Shear,
Aye.
Trustee Tomlinson,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Brittingham,
Aye.
Chairman Groby.
Aye, motion carries. Number 3, information items, unless anyone has any questions. We will move to item number 4. Jay, did you want to say something?
No, I am item number 4A right here.
Oh, I'm sorry, you beat me to the punch here. Okay, item 4A, consider waiving the requirement for competitive bidding per ordinance 1864A and approval of purchase of the sewer line rapid assessment tool, SL-RAT from Duke's Root Control in the amount of $26,430.
I know it's hard not to just call it the sewer rat, because it is what
That's
it
what
is.
I wanted to
Yeah,
call it.
I think that's probably why they did it. Thank you again for allowing me to present this, Council and Mayor. Byron, if you could, just go ahead and pull up the map. What's that? Okay. Yeah. So the request for this to remove the competitive bidding is based due in part to the fact that this is a one-of-a-kind tool. I included in your all's packet the sole source document. I know we don't like to use that word, but that documentation was actually coming from InfoSense, which is the maker of the SL-RAT tool. We have had the opportunity to borrow one from OMAG last year, roughly around Labor Day time. And we were able to canvass about 80% of the city using this tool. The downside is when you don't own it and you're borrowing it on sort of a library system, is we have to wait for other cities to borrow it and we have to check it out. This is an OMAG certified device. I'd like you, if you could, just look at the map that's up there. Each one of those squares is a manhole. This device is a 2-piece unit. It has a transponder and a receiver. When we stick the transponder in one manhole and the receiver in the connecting manhole, it gives us the fitness of our sewer lines in the city. Red is obviously not great. Yellow is somewhere in the middle. It's like, hey, get out there and check it when you have the opportunity. Green is really good, which, by the way, the city of Durant, out of the first 16 cities to use this tool, we had the highest rating on our sewer lines. The white ones are ones that errored out for whatever reason, and we have to go back and do those. But again, I would have to wait and borrow that tool before I can do it. But basically, this is giving you a bird's eye view of all the sewer lines in town. It creates a map for us and allows us to know which ones are going to need work. The benefit of owning our own would be that we can use it anytime we want and then actually work on the line, fix it, and then run it again to see if it shows up as green. So that's the reason for the request. There is no other tool like this one. This is also an OMAG certified device, meaning that lately, anytime we get a tort claim that's based on wastewater lines, one of the first questions they're going to ask me is, did you deploy the SLRAT tool? Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I could borrow it from OMAG, but again, it's one of those where we have to check it out and it takes forever sometimes to get one back. So, unless you have any other questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Jay? If
Jay,
not,
just so I understand too, you kind of referenced in town, but any resident within the city?
In the city limits. Anybody on city sewer.
Okay.
When we first had it, they only gave us 2 weeks. And in that 2 weeks, we were able to complete 80% of the city. So that was wonderful. We did the entire main urban area of the city, and we did some of our trouble spot neighborhoods that still have clay sewer lines. I'm looking forward to being able to finish and go out to Armstrong and do, Country Estates and those areas, and then go out to Sunny Meadows and finish those areas as well. But we will encompass the entire city limits, or at least every resident that's on city sewer.
Jay, will this be used all the time, or will it just be once you find them, will you have to constantly go back and use it, or will it?
Yeah, it'll be one of the situations where once we get the entire city's footprint completed, and we're going to find all of our red ones first, obviously, go back, fix those, and then run it again, and hopefully it'll show up as green the second time out. And if we need to make repairs or we need to make wholesale replacement, those are things that we're going to have to face as we get to them.
Okay.
But I just want to say on a selfish note with this tool that this is our first chance to really be proactive with fixing our sewer lines instead of waiting for somebody to call and say, I have a sewer problem. This is our real first opportunity to get out there and get ahead of the problem instead of wait for one to hit us.
Okay.
Jay, you may know, or Paul, you may know, does owning something like this and utilizing something like this have a positive effect on the city's liability insurance rate, or I just don't know. It seems like it would be effective in reducing claims eventually.
Yeah, it would on experience, I would think, so eventually on rates, I don't know.
And I do know that OMAG has that information. I was actually waiting on a letter that hasn't arrived yet that I was going to attach to this, but you have the opportunity, of course, to reach out to any OMAG representative and find out. But yes, it's highly regarded for that matter.
Jay, could I just ask again, what was the white?
The white was when we first got it, we were new people using this tool, and OMAG actually came down, sent a rep down, and he hung out with us all day while we used it. But we found out when we tried to go out first thing in the morning, when everyone's using their showers or finishing up laundry from the night before or whatnot, and the sewer line is running full bore with lots of water, it's too much for it to get a reading. So we had to learn which times of day to do which line. So that was a trial and error piece, but we figured it out.
Thank you.
Are we ready for a motion?
Move we waive the requirement of bidding for ordinance 1864A and approve the purchase of the SLRAT from Duke's Root Control in the amount of $26,430.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please record the vote?
Trustee Morris?
Aye.
Trustee Shear?
Aye.
Trustee Tomlinson?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Brittingham?
Aye.
Chairman Groby?
Aye. Motion carries. Next item, number B, consider waiving the requirement for competitive bidding per ordinance 1864A and approval to spend $100,000 for the service provided by Ebonshade, Inc. to dispose of sludge produced at the wastewater treatment plant. Marty again.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm asking you to consider waiving requirement competitive bidding because nobody wants this stuff. Literally, there's no other vendor who will take it off our hands, which is why we're putting in a sludge press, which will pay for itself eventually. But this is about the annual cost of doing business with Ebonshade to get rid of our sludge. We did include a new quote for price per load that they're going to charge us. The 100,000 is budgeted for exactly this purpose. We just need to get the approval to purchase, basically.
Okay.
I'd be happy to clarify what sludge is if you don't know, but you're not gonna wanna see it.
Is there any discussion? Do we have a motion?
Make a motion that we waive the competitive bidding requirement per ordinance 1864 and approval to spend $100,000 for the service provided by Espen Shade Incorporated to dispose of sludge. Good job.
We have a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please record the vote?
Trustee Morris?
Aye.
Trustee Shear?
Aye.
Trustee Tomlinson?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Brittingham?
Aye.
Chairman Groby?
Aye, motion carries. Thank you, Marty.
I'm here again.
You still here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, number C, consider approval of change order number 1 for the Moody Lift Station project to reduce overall cost of the project by $98,870.
So last month, if you'll remember, I brought you this project and we knew it was going to be over budget. And so we accepted that project and awarded the bid contingent on a change order that would get us back within our budget. This is that change order. We are going to value engineer this in a way, there's a couple items that we had on there that we really wanted, but maybe really didn't need. Some things like lifts, that we can borrow lifts from other locations to move over there when the time comes. The coating for the vault itself, in a perfect world, we'd love to have that, but that's $50,000 all by itself. And then some work to be done by what was going to be the contractor, but now we're gonna pick up and do that labor ourselves. It's really just to relocate one force main across Mooney Road and about, I don't remember, it's a couple hundred feet down to where it ties into the other main. It's not a huge project, but when you hire a contractor, it costs more obviously than it does to do it ourselves. And so what we're really getting out of this bid now is the lift station that we need, the right size and the right structure to handle development in the area, which we're stopped at right now because we can't handle any more sewer. And then we'll work into the perks of the job as we go on, and we'll do a little labor along the way to get it as well. So if you approve this change order, we will begin construction very soon.
Okay. Is there any comments or discussion? Any questions for Marty? Are we ready to call for the vote?
Move approval of change order 1 for the Mooney Lift Station to reduce the cost by $98,870.
I second the motion. We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please record the vote?
Trustee Morris?
Aye.
Trustee Shear?
Aye.
Trustee Tomlinson?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Brittingham?
Aye.
Chairman Groby?
Aye, motion carries. Do we have a motion for adjournment out of the Durant Utility Authority?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn out of the Utility Authority. Would the clerk record the vote?
Trustee Morris?
Aye.
Trustee Shear?
Aye.
Trustee Tomlinson?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Brittingham?
Aye.
Chairman Groby?
Aye. We are now adjourned out of the Utility Authority, and we are now adjourned in the Durant Airport Authority. Let the record show that it is 7:28. And we will now call the Durant Airport Authority to order. Could the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Morris?
Here.
Trustee Shear?
Here.
Trustee Tomlinson?
Here.
Vice Chairman Brittingham?
Here.
Chairman Groby?
Here, we do have a quorum. Under number 1, consent items, we have 2 items. Does anybody wish to remove either of the items or to approve them as is?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent items.
We have a motion to approve the consent items. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please record the vote?
Trustee Morris,
Aye.
Trustee Shear,
Aye.
Trustee Tomlinson.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Brittingham,
Aye.
Chairman Groby.
Aye. Motion carries. Next item on down is new business. Do we have any new business to discuss? If there is no new business, we need a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Motion and a second. Would the clerk please call the vote?
Trustee Morris,
Aye.
Trustee Shear,
Aye.
Trustee Tomlinson.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Brittingham,
Aye.
Chairman Groby.
Aye. We're now adjourned. Unless I missed something.
Can I talk to the